Dear friends, hello again. In this video, I'm going to talk about chapter 4 of the Turkish politics book, which is about political ideologies in Turkish political life. Let's talk about the historical background of ideologies in Turkey. But first, let's define ideology. Ideology means a system of thought that one defines and defends. Every ideology tries to explain social reality from its own perspective. Therefore, they provide a political attitude, or let's say a political map for people who defend them. Social movements, political parties, or groups also apply their thoughts and policies based on this map, based on the ideology they defend. Let's look at the history now. With the pressure of the Western countries and the changing social, intellectual, and cultural structure of the world in the 19th century, Ottoman intellectuals proposed new ideologies. The aim of these ideologies were to save the Ottoman Empire from these threats of the changing world structure. These ideologies were Ottomanism, Pan-Islamism, Turkism, and Turanism. They are systems of thought, they are ideologies, but they have no sociological basis. They are just political projects proposed by bureaucrats or, let's say, intellectuals. With nationalistic movements spreading all over the world, Ottomanism was invented by these intellectuals with the aim to protect the empire from, let's say, to protect the integrity and unity of the empire under the Ottoman identity. So another version of this is Pan-Islamism, because they also wanted to preserve the unity of the empire based on a religious identity. The other two that we mentioned, Turkism and Turanism, were also lacking sociological basis, and therefore, they also didn't have a counterpart in the Western system. That's why they were not very successful in gaining broad support. And these bring us to ideologies in Turkey. Since Turkey didn't go through the intellectual changes caused by the Industrial Revolution, and the intellectuals were modernized and they were westernized due to their education. That's why they pushed for transferring the ideologies from the West. And the national struggle, we have been through the War of Independence, ended with the Declaration of the Republic. So after the national struggle and the Declaration of the Republic, a transformation from an empire to a secular and national regime based on Turkish identity started. That's why we say this is a nationalistic ideology. And Kemalism was invented because nationalism was not enough. Kemalism was invented as a foundational ideology, foundational and constitutional ideology at the stage. And this ideology had statist and also revolutionist principles, which we define as 6 arrows. Kemalism is an official ideology, as you know, and it aimed to build a modern society and a modern state. The society was not ready for such kind of big and powerful change. So first of all, this ideology tried to design the society through certain cultural and economic and social regulations, because it tried to form a homogeneous social and cultural structure, because it needed a lot of support for change. So we can say nationalism has developed as language nationalism because we needed cultural change. So language nationalism started its efforts to simplify the language. And in 1970s, we see later in history that nationalist ideology is still represented by Nationalist Action Party, which was founded by and which was founded under the leadership of Turkish. So this understanding of nationalism, not Kemalism, supported anti-communism, of course. Okay, another understanding of nationalism after Kemalism and Turkish Nationalist Action Party, which wasn't against socialism, is left socialist nationalism. So we can talk about a lot of forms of different nationalisms in Turkey. So when we look at the left socialist nationalists in Turkey, we see that this is another understanding of nationalism, but it is not against socialism. We also have the liberal conservative nationalism as another form of nationalism in Turkey. This is also left and also again not against socialism, but with an addition of modernity and democracy to Turkish and also Islamic elements. So let's look at another ideology that we see we need to discuss in Turkish political life, which is conservatism. Again, there are various forms of usage of conservatism in Turkey. Let's talk about them as different movements. First of all, we see conservatism defending the Ottoman past against the Republican regime. And then we see the people who are conservatives against change. And also we see traditionalists against progression. And also we see religious conservatism against secularism, etc. So as a whole, we can say that Turkish conservatism is largely a criticism of Kemalist modernization. But again, it doesn't constitute a political movement. So we see another ideology that is the socialism and the left and how it developed in Turkey. So socialism refers to an egalitarian social system, and it is organized on the basis of common property. Because it says there is oppression on people and you need to form an egalitarian system to protect the exploitation of the oppressed. Although there were some figures, important figures in the 20s who are socialists, there was no social base and there was no democratic atmosphere around those times. Socialists mostly embraced Kemalism in Turkey, especially at the beginning of the Republican period. But in 1960s, left started spreading its views, both in the world and in Turkey. And this time this spread was more rapidly, but they were both in a lot of various different fragments, and also most of them were not opposing the coup idea, so they were never very powerful in Turkish ideological life. Today we can see social democracy in Turkey as the closest movement to socialism or the leftist movements. Later, we need to look at Islamism as an important ideology in Turkey, which will also be talked in different, let's say, phases or generations. Islamism first emerged as a reaction to the colonizing world, the colonizing West, in other words. So the first generation Islamists actually tried to save the state, save the Ottoman state through the commonness of the idea of religion. But the new republic and the secularistic reforms of the new republic put them into a silent period. Second generation Islamists, we see, they tried to make their voices heard after the one-party period ended, and they became a bit more powerful. But when we look at the third generation Islamists, we see that it is the product of the historical context created by the period after 1980 coup and the liberalization policies of Turgut Özal after 1983 elections. In this period, Islamists were one of the main actors in the public debate, and they are, we say, the product of post-1980 conditions and about the atmosphere of civil society, pluralism and human rights. Next, we need to look at liberalism. Liberalism means being opposed to all forms of oppression against the individual. So individual is the most important thing for liberalism. It is actually, in short, called freedom theory. The free individual and the idea of limited state was not liked by either leftists or rightists in Turkey. So we can say that liberalism has never been very powerful in Turkey. Finally, we're going to talk about feminism as an ideology important in Turkey. Feminism argues that all other ideologies legitimize gender inequalities, and all other ideologies help to reproduce the patriarchal system. That's why they offer feminism instead. When we look at the feminist or the women's movement in Turkey, we see that it dates back to 19th century, the last century of the Ottoman Empire. There were a lot of associations, groups and publications by women about feminist movement in this period. But the most important phase we need to talk about when we say feminism is the post-80 period in Turkish ideological history, because this is the most significant phase in the history of feminism in Turkey, because both academic interest and also the public movements in favor of women's rights and overcoming the discrimination and violence against women in both political life, public life and also private life started to be discussed in the post-80 period. And we have in today's Turkey a lot of women's organizations, and now their struggle still continues. Thank you.